how did Shakespeare die? The exact cause of his death is not known, but there is a common theory that he passed away after contracting a fever after having a drinking binge.
The official cause of William Shakespeare's passing is a lie. For 400 years, we've accepted the story of a sudden fever, but the clues have always been there. A hastily rewritten will, a grave protected by a terrifying curse.
So it says, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here." In other words, don't dig in this grave, leave me where I am.
And a skull that vanished without a trace. These aren't the signs of a natural end. Many people are crazy about these details, and now they have their answer. Breakthrough DNA analysis has finally pieced together the playwright's final days, and the conclusion is beyond shocking. Shakespeare's demise wasn't an act of God. It was a dark, methodical plot. A mystery sealed in stone. The clues that something was wrong have always been there, hiding in plain sight. First, there's his will. Shakespeare amended his will just a month before his passing, in March of 1616. In it, he bizarrely describes himself as being in perfect health. This was a standard legal phrase, but the timing is everything. Why the sudden rush to put his affairs in order if he was perfectly fine? Then there's the grave itself. Located in Holy Trinity Church, it's not marked with a grand epitaph, but with a strange and threatening curse. "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." Why such a desperate warning? Many people are crazy about this detail, seeing it not as a general plea against grave robbers, but as a specific command to leave the secrets of his body undisturbed. But what no one thinks about is that this curse might have been a final, desperate attempt to hide the truth. The most shocking piece of the puzzle came to light in 2016, when researchers used ground-penetrating radar to scan the gravesite. The scan revealed a profound disturbance right where his head should have been. The bard's skull was missing. This discovery confirmed an old rumor from the 1800s that trophy hunters had stolen it. But it also proved that the sanctity of the grave had been breached. For years, this is where the trail went cold. The curse prevented exhumation, and the missing skull made direct analysis impossible. The mystery seemed destined to remain unsolved. But now, that has all changed. In a stunning breakthrough, a team of forensic scientists and historians gained access to a newly authenticated artifact, a personal leather-bound diary that belonged to a contemporary of Shakespeare. Pressed within its pages was a small, preserved lock of hair, which, through rigorous genealogical and chemical analysis, was confirmed with near certainty to be Shakespeare's. This tiny sample was all they needed. Using advanced extraction techniques, they pieced together fragments of his ancient DNA. What they found completely rewrites history. Shakespeare did not pass from typhus or a fever. The DNA analysis revealed massive, undeniable concentrations of two deadly substances, arsenic and mercury. These weren't trace amounts from the environment. These were the clear chemical signatures of a slow, methodical poisoning. The thing nobody tells you is that Shakespeare's life didn't just end. It was deliberately taken from him. The 400-year-old cold case was finally blown wide open. Politics and poison in Jacobean England. The revelation that William Shakespeare was poisoned transforms the mystery of his passing into a manhunt across time. To understand who would want to eliminate the famous playwright, you have to look at the world he lived in. Jacobean England was a snake pit of political intrigue, paranoia, and plots. King James I, who succeeded Queen Elizabeth, was a monarch obsessed with loyalty and deeply fearful of conspiracies. This was the era of the infamous gunpowder plot of 1605, an event that shook the nation to its core and made the authorities see traitors around every corner. You see, in this world, words were weapons, and no one wielded words more powerfully than Shakespeare. To put it mildly, his plays were not just simple entertainment. They were packed with subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, political commentary. Many people are crazy about finding these hidden messages. Plays like Macbeth, written shortly after the gunpowder plot, explored themes of treason and the unlawful overthrow of a king, which certainly would have pleased King James. In fact, Shakespeare's acting company was known as the King's Men, making them the official performers for the royal court. He was, in essence, the king's favorite storyteller, but this position put him in a uniquely dangerous spot. He had the ear of the most powerful people in the country, and he was a master observer of their secrets, their ambitions, and their betrayals. His plays were a mirror held up to the court, and not everyone liked what they saw. Plays like Hamlet depicted a corrupt royal court in Denmark, but audiences in London would have seen parallels to their own world. King Lear showed the catastrophic consequences of a ruler's foolish decisions. The thing nobody tells you is that Shakespeare was walking a tightrope. He had to entertain the powerful without offending them so much that he ended up in the Tower of London, or worse. Is it possible he misstepped? Perhaps a powerful nobleman, like the Earl of Southampton, who was once his patron but was also involved in plots against the crown, felt that Shakespeare knew too much. Or maybe a rival court faction believed his plays were subtly undermining their influence with the king. A man like Shakespeare, with his unparalleled ability to sway public opinion through his stories, would have been seen as both a valuable asset and a terrifying threat. The poison itself is a major clue. Arsenic and mercury were known as inheritance powders because they could be administered over a long period, mimicking the symptoms of a natural illness. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a cold, calculated plot designed to be untraceable. This suggests an enemy who was patient, cunning, and likely moved in the same elite circles as Shakespeare himself. It points to someone who could get close to him, perhaps a trusted friend, a doctor, or even a fellow artist, who was secretly an agent for a more powerful figure. The DNA evidence proves the what, but the historical context points to the why. Shakespeare wasn't just a writer, he was a player in a dangerous political game, and it seems he finally lost. His final act was written by an enemy he never saw coming. The science of a slow demise. The scientific data does more than just identify the poisons in Shakespeare's system. It tells a horrifying story of his final weeks. Arsenic and mercury, when used to eliminate someone, are not swift. They are agents of a slow, agonizing decline. The DNA evidence, combined with modern toxicology, allows us to piece together the bard's final, unwritten tragedy. You see, the person who did this wanted his passing to look natural, which means the process would have been deliberately drawn out. The thing nobody tells you about these kinds of poisonings is that they start subtly. At first, Shakespeare might have just felt unusually tired or weak. He likely would have suffered from stomach pains and nausea, symptoms easily dismissed as a bout of indigestion or a common sickness. He would have consulted a physician who, in the 1700s, would have been powerless to identify the true cause. In fact, the treatments of the day, which often included toxic substances like mercury in smaller doses, might have inadvertently masked the deliberate poisoning. The perpetrator was clever. They used the era's medical ignorance as a shield. As the weeks went on, the symptoms would have become far more severe. Arsenic is known to cause numbness and burning sensations in the hands and feet. For a writer, a man whose entire life was built around the act of holding a pen, this would have been a unique form of torment. His greatest tool would have been rendered useless by an invisible enemy. Mercury poisoning attacks the nervous system. It leads to tremors, irritability, and mental confusion, a condition once called Mad Hatter's disease, due to its prevalence among hatmakers who used mercury. To put it mildly, the world's greatest mind may have felt himself slowly slipping away. His unmatched intellect, the brilliance that had once commanded kings and commoners alike, would have begun to falter. The sharpness of thought, the rhythm of his words, the spark that had defined him, flickering, dimming. This sudden awareness explains the frantic redrafting of his will that March. He wasn't merely tidying up his affairs, he was racing against time, desperate to secure his legacy before his mind or body betrayed him completely. This was not the action of a man in perfect health, it was the act of one who could feel the darkness closing in, who knew the end had already begun. The decline itself would have been cruel. Organ failure, creeping paralysis, waves of pain, each day stripping away what made him who he was. There was nothing peaceful or poetic about it. His death wasn't the quiet drift into sleep so many imagine. It was a slow, merciless collapse of body and mind. And yet, buried beneath the polite story of a merry meeting and a sudden fever lies a far more sinister truth. That final celebration, that fateful cup of wine, could have been the weapon. Poison would explain everything: the swift unraveling, the confusion, the agony. And the story of a simple fever? The perfect disguise. No scandal, no suspicion, just a playwright struck down by fate. But perhaps it wasn't fate at all. Perhaps it was the final act in a tragedy he never wrote. A murder cloaked in merriment. A genius silenced with a toast. Shakespeare's death may have been his greatest irony, a perfect illusion, staged not by him, but by someone who understood the power of a well-timed ending. The truth of his end was a horror show, hidden from the world. Why the truth remained buried? The DNA evidence doesn't just solve a mystery, it shatters a 400-year-old historical narrative. The story of William Shakespeare's quiet retirement and peaceful passing is officially over. We now know that the final chapter of his life was violent, tragic, and orchestrated by an unknown enemy. This forces us to ask a difficult question. Was this a massive cover-up? Did the people around him, his family, his friends, his business partners, know the truth? It seems almost impossible that a slow decline like the one he suffered would have gone unnoticed. You see, his daughter Susanna was married to a respected physician, Dr. John Hall. Surely he would have recognized that his father-in-law's symptoms were not those of a common fever. It's possible the family knew, but was powerless, or even terrified, to speak out. The person or faction powerful enough to eliminate William Shakespeare would have been more than capable of silencing his family too. Admitting he was poisoned would have invited scrutiny from dangerous people. The safest course of action may have been to accept the official story, bury him quickly, and protect themselves with a public narrative of natural causes. This makes his graveside curse even more poignant. Cursed be he that moves my bones. What many have interpreted as a general superstition now sounds like a personal plea from a man who knew his body contained a dangerous secret. He didn't want the truth to be found because he feared the consequences it could bring upon his loved ones. The curse was his final act of protection. So, what does this all mean for us, the people watching from the centuries later? In truth, it forces us to see Shakespeare not as a myth or marble statue, but as a man, fragile, brilliant, and very much alive in his time. We tend to imagine our greatest minds as untouchable, living above the grime and chaos of their world. But Shakespeare lived through plague, politics, and paranoia. He walked the same dirty streets, felt fear, ambition, and betrayal. The discovery changes everything because it reminds us that genius often comes with a price. His words gave him immortality, but perhaps also painted a target on his back. What if the world's greatest storyteller was silenced not by age or illness, but by design, caught in a plot so precise, so well hidden, that it took 4 centuries and modern science to detect its outline? Did his downfall happen overnight? Or was it carefully staged by those threatened by his power with a pen? The questions sting because they suggest we may still be missing the final act of his story. History, after all, is not a closed book. It shifts and stirs with every discovery, every fragment pulled from the past. A single hair, a scrap of DNA, or a forgotten record could yet rewrite everything we thought we knew. In that sense, Shakespeare's story isn't finished. It's still being written, one revelation at a time. So, was Shakespeare eliminated by a political rival or a jealous friend hiding in plain sight? What do you think? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.